Mark, how are you doing on this rainy New York afternoon?
Great. Yeah, doing great.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us.
Of course.
Just for our audience to get a sense of who you are and what Clay is all about, tell us a little bit about the role that you're playing and what Clay does.
Yeah, so I have been at Clay for about 4 years now, from when we were in kind of like a little apartment in Williamsburg, and have seen how things have developed kind of internally on our engineering team. And so I'm currently the head of technology at Clay, and that kind of means kind of like a high level IC. Sometimes I step into a management role in order to sort of like drive a project forward or whatever. Basically what I do is I kind of like look for kind of the highest impact thing that is facing sort of Clay the company or Clay the product, and I kind of target that and kind of make sure and drive sort of some sort of solution there. And so right now, one of the biggest things that everybody's thinking about is AI software development, basically agentic software development lifecycle stuff. So that's kind of what I'm looking into these days.
Awesome. Well, we definitely want to dig into that because that's going to be very relevant to our audience. And Clay has kind of like pioneered this whole new job title, this whole new field
Mhm.
of go-to-market engineering. You've been with the company since the early days, since when you were in a apartment in Williamsburg, as you said. Tell us a little bit about like what go-to-market engineering is, how you guys kind of pioneered that. It's really interesting to see just the growth, the incredible growth that you guys have had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's like an evolution of sort of like a number of patterns that had been happening in sales orgs, throughout sort of the tech industry and wider. Um, but yeah, it's essentially sort of this an evolution maybe of like the RevOps role, if people are familiar with that, where basically you have these people who are behind the scenes doing a lot of orchestration of the data that's powering their sales teams. Um, and so, Clay has become sort of like an integral tool in sort of connecting like their CRM to various data providers, et cetera, and sort of like piping a lot of data such that it's in the right place and it's clean and it's fresh. That starts to look kind of like an engineering problem if you kind of squint, right? Like maybe you're not writing like code, but you are sort of designing kind of what looks like a data pipeline. You're storing things in various places and routing data and you're kind of stitching a lot of different tools together, and that's essentially engineering. And so that's kind of where we got the term from, is we were like, you're doing engineering for go to market. You're a go to market engineer. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
Incredible. And then I know AI and the leverage of LLMs has been kind of a big part of Clay's growth as well, right? So you're able to do a lot of
Yeah.
automation and cool AI wizardry to help streamline that job function. Any cool examples recently of, things that you've shipped or where LLMs are having like a big impact, you think, to the product that you're selling?
We have like a web research agent that can also sort of like take screenshots of web pages and things like that. And so we actually, for one of our customers, they wanted to see local businesses, what trash vendor they were using, like what like waste management vendor they were using, and also whether maybe their trash cans were sort of like overflowing or something like that. And so that's kind of a hard question to answer,
Yeah, you got to
but
send boots on the ground, send people into the
yeah,
field was probably the
exactly.
old way.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you'd have to drive around and maybe have a list of people that you would go by their business and kind of check out their trash cans, maybe. Or maybe you wouldn't do this at all because it's just not a scalable thing to actually action on. But we designed kind of a workflow in collaboration with them around sort of taking like Google Street View photos, and having our web research agent sort of navigate to that sort of address of the business, and then take a screenshot and say like, okay, what color are these trash cans, that you can sort of guess the vendor based on the color of the trash can. And also like you can ask the agent like, does the trash can look like it's overflowing? Is there trash sort of next to it, or like, coming out of it, or is the lid open, or whatever. And so that was like a complete new unlock for them in terms of like a workflow that they were able to add to their sort of go-to-market strategy. That's like a particularly fun one that but it's down to mostly the creativity of the go-to-market engineers that are actually building these workflows to come up with that idea in the first place. So
Very cool. Well, it sounds like you're working right now on the internal enablement of how your engineering team is using AI to
mhm.
ship products faster and better.
Yep.
let's talk about some of the challenges that you're facing. Like, what are some of the cool problems that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, everybody's still a little bit trying to figure this out. Some companies have been very sort of vocal about their successes and sort of the things that they've been trying. Um, and I think we've taken sort of like a very sort of laissez-faire kind of approach to AI adoption internally for engineering. Like basically any tool that anybody has wanted to try out, we've supported that. And we're trying to see patterns, and most people have landed on a couple of different tools. Primarily Claude Code and Cursor seems to be what people tend to gravitate towards in our particular engineering team. But yeah, people are open to experiment with whatever they want. I think some challenges that we're running into are around sort of like verification of changes, and also review bottlenecks, right? Like writing code isn't the only part of the software development lifecycle, and in fact is like probably not even the majority of of the lifecycle. But those are some of the things that we've been a little bit more challenged with, and we've actually created a new dedicated team to sort of like take on some of these challenges and like get things working really well for people so that they can just like keep shipping stuff. So
Very cool. And something we're seeing across the industry. Yeah, code has sped up, but the specification of what to build and that process of aligning on the direction with E, P, and D, and then the verification that what you've built is good, it's high quality, it passes all of the functional tests, satisfies the requirements. That's where the new bottlenecks are emerging,
yeah.
and folks are starting to think about how they AIify those parts of the process as well to gain efficiency, and then you can speed up the overall cycle. This new team that you are investing in, tell me a little bit about that. Like, what's the hypothesis around building a team to focus on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's traditional DevEx where you're trying to speed up humans, and then there's kind of agentic DevEx is sort of what we're calling it, maybe a provisional term or something like that for the team. Um, and so yeah, it's really about building kind of like the foundations upon which your kind of like agentic engineering life cycle, like entire process can happen. Um, and agents are a little bit different than humans when they build software. They don't always like tell you what they struggled with, or tell you what could be better about this particular thing. I feel like humans are very vocal about like, oh man, this thing is slowing me down, and they're kind of doing a little bit of like self-evaluation. Not to say that agents can't do that, but I feel like most of the time you could ask them that, you could ask them to do that. And so we want to build sort of like, the system upon which, agents, we can make sure that we're effectively using them, that our engineers are effective in sort of their usage, and sort of see what's working and what's not. And so a big part of that is kind of this observability layer that we're trying to establish so we can see, how much teams are using various agents, how successful they are in terms of like shipping code that doesn't need to be rewritten immediately, and how, or if they're struggling with various parts of the code base, because our code base actually exists from sort of a pre-agents era. At least non-trivial chunks of it do. Agents can struggle with those sort of like legacy parts of the code base, and so we want to see where they are struggling, and identify those parts for maybe sort of like refactoring or additional context via like an agent's MD or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of what this team is for. And then there's also an evangelization sort of like component to it as well, where we want to make sure that there's knowledge sharing going on between the humans as well about how best to do that. And so we're establishing an AI guild internally, with each of the teams having like a member in the guild, so that we can sort of disseminate knowledge about best practices and things like that. So
Very cool. I'm curious, and you might not know the answer to this yet, but as you're establishing a central team to think about agent experience and try to optimize those flows, check when they're calling the same tool multiple times with erroneous arguments, they
mhm.
need documentation, there's code review feedback that's getting flagged that could maybe be incorporated into documentation, linters, tests, things like that. There's all these tools that you might be able to invest in improving the agent experience. Are you thinking that you'll need to do more standardization and say these are kind of the golden paths, the golden roads, or do you think you'll be able to continue that philosophy of open experimentation, bring your own tool, let a thousand flowers bloom.
Yeah, I think that we'll probably continue on the experimentation for now. I don't, basically, I think what we're waiting for is sort of like natural kind of like fault lines, maybe, or like natural sort of like people gravitating towards the best thing, versus, standardizing too early and then, people are really like fighting the tooling or really wishing that they could use this other thing. And so, like for example, like in our cloud development environment stuff, we want to enable engineers to be able to use that. Right now, we're primarily confined to our local laptops for development. We even had a guy get a second laptop so that he could do more agentic stuff for now to unblock him. But yeah, we're working on basically we see that as the future. Even with cloud development environments, we're not sure like which one is the best one right now. They're all kind of similar, but like some there's trade-offs between various ones, and there's not a clear winner right now. And so we're just allowing people to sort of continue to experiment there, just like they would with their like models and stuff, until
Great.
we have more clarity. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Given that the scope of the team and like the mission is fairly broad and it's in this whole new arena of agent experience, how are you thinking about like where to focus first? Is there an acute need that you see that the team is, tackling first and foremost?
Yeah, I mean, we have some ideas around, what is actually taking people a long time in their sort of, day-to-day jobs. Things around sort of like having to babysit PRs to make sure that they like, address all of the bot feedback and then also the linters and various type checkers and things like, you don't want to have the human to have to sit there and check like, oh, did the lint pass, and that's a pretty like robotic thing that in order for that was perfect for an agent to fix. So those are some of the things that we're targeting, but we also are trying to like kind of I think there's this term that maybe OpenAI published in like a blog post or something like that, but it basically like close the loop, where essentially an agent can sort of like build, test, and sort of post a PR and maybe even ship and deploy all sort of like automatically, especially for things that are deemed like not super risky. That's like the full blown version of this, plus like the augment the human version of this. So we are targeting both of those things, and then but fundamentally, like the observability layer is sort of I think we've talked to a few other companies, and I feel like they're not focusing on that as much, which is kind of interesting to me. Like I do feel like you need to establish visibility to see what you're doing is effective. So that's sort of where we're targeting that as that foundational layer, in addition to all the like agents.md context hierarchy stuff as well. We're doing all the things, I guess, and
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
trying to do
yeah,
them. But
totally.
yeah, yeah,
Totally. No, I mean, if you think about kind of traditional developer platforms and developer experience, which you alluded to earlier, you would just survey and ask the engineers, or they would speak up and they
right.
would tell you what's broken. I think it's really smart to apply that same philosophy to your agent workflows and assess where in the traces they're getting stuck, where
Yep.
things can be optimized and improved. So, totally on board with you there. You've probably seen some of the blog posts from Stripe. They talked about Minions, Ramp. They've got their background agent system.
Yep.
WorkOS just put one out a couple weeks back. And it does seem like that's the direction a lot of companies are investing in, which is cloud environments and the ability to offload or delegate wholesale tasks, maybe even eventually wholesale features to these agents so that they can close the loop. They can do build, they can do self-verification, they can open a PR. Maybe they have some additional agents that are auto reviewing
Yep.
those PRs, and then the human user, is really just doing high level user acceptance testing.
Right.
This idea of software
And
factories and
specification, maybe.
agents,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, agents doing all these different parts of the process. Um, how do you see that? Where are you on that journey? Do you have any kind of background agents that you're developing? I know you spoke about cloud environments and seeing that as the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's the team thinking about that?
Yeah, we're experimenting with a few different things there. Like for example, the project that I was that I'm like kind of currently spinning off of, but basically is like this new kind of like workflow builder feature inside of Clay, and It has sort of like an MCP server in front of it, so you can actually build workflows using Claude Code. And that was actually a big unlock for us. And so we actually set up a Devin workflow in order to sort of, it's almost like a fuzzer essentially. It like builds a random workflow using the MCP server that we built. And then can actually run tests with that same MCP server and look at the sort of the logs that it's running everything locally in the cloud, and it can look at the logs and like see what happened, and then like sort of identify things that might need fixes, and then it can actually sort of like make the fix, test whether it worked, and then post a PR as a result. And so that's this is our sort of like first foray into like kind of a full closed loop kind of development cycle. So yeah, we're definitely doing that. We we want to expand that to other teams and other parts of the product as well. So that's basically what we're going to start working on next. We only run it once a day right now, but I feel like we could also turn up the knob there and then like see, you know, how much stuff can it actually find, and
Yeah,
it's finding things every day basically. So which is good. I mean, it's new software, so it's good that we're ironing out the bugs. But yeah,
very cool. So it's almost like an automated QA agent that's
yep,
going and
yeah,
testing and finding, errors and then trying to fix them on its
yep,
own.
that's right. Yeah,
That's very cool. As you're kind of looking forward and you think about this world where you've got more of these background agents, you've got more autonomous systems, you are closing the loop. How are you thinking about your role as
sure.
a senior IC engineer? You've been building software for a long time. Before Clay, you were working on a lot of critical infrastructure systems at Meta and Apple and other companies. So you've been
Yeah,
in this game for a while. What do you think senior IC engineering looks like? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think it
yeah,
looks
yeah.
like 6 months, a year from now as we go down this road?
The way that I've sort of been thinking about it is like, so my background is in like programming languages. Like that's what I studied type systems and stuff in college, and at Apple I was working on JavaScript Core, which is their JavaScript VM inside a WebKit. And so my brain naturally tends towards the like thinking about things from those kind of like perspectives or whatever. And to me, it kind of feels like basically we're kind of entering sort of like there's this concept of like abstraction, right? Where you kind of you're still operating within kind of the bounds of the system, but you're at a higher level of abstraction or less detail about the actual low level things that are going on. And then there's kind of another version of abstraction with this, which is kind of like metaprogramming, right? Where you can sort of like do these like Lisp macros or maybe C++ like template metaprogramming or something like that, or maybe even like a Ruby DSL. And that allows you to actually treat sort of like the components of the system that you're running as sort of like first class objects and sort of like directly manipulate them. I think what engineering will end up looking like in the future is like it's kind of like metaprogramming for software engineering. Like you're not building the system directly anymore, you're building the system that builds the system. So it's kind of like a meta version of this of software engineering. And so I think that that's basically what it's going to turn into ultimately is like you're just building the guardrails, you're building the container in which the agent can like build the thing that you want it to build, and you're just sort of offering guidance to it, and it sort of figures out how to do it to your specifications. So it's just going to be getting really good at being very specific about how exactly you want something built. And yeah, so I think that
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's going to look like in the future. So
Yeah, there's an analogy that I heard maybe 6 months ago that kind of stuck with me that I think is analogous to what you're saying, which is if you look at the automobile manufacturing industry and the assembly lines, there historically were a lot of manual labor tasks in the assembly process, and then robotics and automation came into the plants, and now many of those tasks are done through those robotics and those machines. But it's not like the factory floor is empty. You have people who are tuning the robots and doing quality assurance over the work that's being done by them. And so the jobs have changed dramatically. And it's kind of this meta overseeing and tuning
great.
of the overall
Yeah,
process. And I do see that as people are talking about harness engineering and AI native developer platforms, thinking about how you are scaffolding your CI/CD, your verification processes, your tests, how you specify and how you validate. These become kind of the new art forms of bringing software to life. So
Yep.
um, that makes a ton of sense. Um, how do you feel? Clay is like a well-respected, innovative engineering culture. You've got a brand that people love. Like, how are folks internally navigating this sea change of like all this new AI stuff? Just at the more human level, like how is the team stomaching it? What's going well? What are some of the challenges as people are thinking about these new job requirements and shifts to their roles and stuff like that?
I think in general, people seem pretty excited. Like we've had a lot of sort of like organic adoption. So people aren't really kicking in their heels or anything. I think, because we haven't had sort of like kind of anything more structured or formal, they've been able to explore and sort of, I feel like it's important to kind of like, we're really optimizing for adoption right now, more so than like efficiency, say, or and so
You're in your token max era.
yeah, kind of a little bit. We don't like finance
You don't
would,
gamify it.
yeah, finance would have words for me if I said
You
let's
don't have a
spend.
leaderboard where
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
incentivizing it, but you're
Right.
also not constraining and optimizing
Exactly,
prematurely.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that there's like we're in this period basically where like you need to build intuition about like how to use the agents effectively. And so we just want people to like get in there and like start doing it. And I think people generally are responding pretty well to it. I think that there is a little bit, it's almost kind of like I heard an analogy the other day that is kind of like Civilization, where like I don't know if you've played Civilization, but you always want to do like one more turn. And it's kind of like that with the with working with an agent as well. You're like, oh well, we could actually do like a little bit more here, and so you just always want to like kind of pull another turn there. So I do think that people like are getting their dopamine hit out of it, and so I think that people haven't lost that aspect of creating new stuff. I think in general it's pretty positive. I will also say on the GTM side of the company, people are very jazzed, not about the engineering team, but about their ability to also sort of build software for themselves. Somebody demoed something to me that they had built the other week. It was like a Chrome extension for something that they wanted to do, and I was like, this is pretty impressive, honestly. And they're not an engineer, they're not on the engineering team, so I think people in general within Clay are excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, the democratization of bringing an idea to life is really
Yeah,
cool. Are you seeing that actually in there's this image that I saw in a blog post a couple weeks ago, Spider-Man emoji of, the PMs and designers and engineers all kind of pointing at each other because they can all kind of step into each other's roles with
right.
engineers doing crude designs and PMs building prototypes as the new version of their spec and all that good stuff, which is awesome because it does allow more free-form expression. But what are you seeing with the kind of the muddying of the roles? Are PM shipping code? Are PMs using prototypes as spec? How is that evolving
Yeah.
with
I feel
Clay?
like it hasn't gotten super muddy, but yeah, there's definitely a lot more overlap now. Like, for example, again, on this project that I'm working on right now, when I first started working on this sort of by myself and built out a prototype for it, I could like do all the design and all the everything myself. Like, I didn't need to involve any other people, which was great for me moving very quickly. And then, over time, as it kind of formed into sort of a cohesive idea or concept, then we started involving more people. But now, for example, I have a designer on the team, and she has, in order to sort of demonstrate some of her design ideas, she just Claude codes like a sort of front end version of like what she wants it to end up looking like. That's much higher fidelity than like what we can generate in our Figmas and right now. So that's very useful, and it's like interactive too, which is great. And so you can kind of see how it's supposed to sort of look without her having to sort of get into the weeds of like actually shipping the code. So she's not necessarily shipping code, but she's like building stuff in order to sort of like get her ideas across, which is
Right.
pretty cool. Um, I would say the PMs generally aren't, at least at Clay, as far as I'm aware, aren't shipping any code. I haven't seen a lot of like demo building stuff from them. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I may not have enough insight there. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's very cool to think of a picture's worth 1,000 words, and
yeah,
if we can reduce the amount of like PRD writing and static design mocking and increase to more free form expression of ideas that more fluidly capture what you're trying to express, and then use that as kind of the input into a requirements process that turns into a spec that then an agent can break down into a tech design and then into tickets. Now we got our software factory flowing.
Yep.
It's a pretty fun world to be able to kind of express ideas more cleanly. We've talked about a lot of the positives. Any worries on the horizon? Any anxieties about all this AI in the SDLC?
In the back of my mind, there is this voice that is kind of like, well, it took you a good while on the job, even after you graduated from college, to sort of like learn a lot of things and sort of build your pattern recognition for like how to build good systems and that type of thing. Um, and I can use that very effectively with an agent as sort of like my co-pilot or whatever. But I do sort of wonder like where is that training happening now? If like everybody is like, I think this is sort of the junior to senior pipeline. Like, have we like cut that significantly, where junior engineers are not actually learning the things that they need to learn in order to be effective with agents? Maybe agents get good enough to sort of like cover that gap. But that is something that I like worry about a little bit as part of the development life cycle is like,
Yeah, yeah.
where are the engineers going to come from that know how to effectively use agents? Um,
I do
you know,
wonder if we'll see more of an apprenticeship mindset in our
mm,
industry. Like if you
yeah,
look at how plumbers and electricians work, there's sort of an apprentice, a junior working with a master plumber, a senior who's doing a job, but teaching them and delegating little bits of it to them and pair programming in
yep,
some sense on it. And that's a very different model than how we've thought about growing juniors, I think, for the last decade, where there would be very modular, discrete, well-specified tasks they could go execute autonomously on and then get review and feedback and
yeah, and
learn
you
through that
slowly increase
process.
the scope of that of the various
Exactly.
projects you're giving them. Yeah,
But now it's almost like the agents are doing that. The agents are
right,
taking the well-defined tasks, and then we're growing the scope of what the agents can do. So
right,
I do think it's ripe for experimentation and cultures to try new styles, and maybe we'll see some resurgence of pair programming and
yeah,
apprenticeship style. But that's a whole different model that companies need to be willing to make that investment. Because
yep,
unlike the well-defined tasks that's like immediately business accretive, the
yep,
apprenticeship model is not immediately accretive. It's more of a
right,
long game. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So and then yeah, zooming out, other stuff about AI that is
Well, I mean, it looks
you know
pretty gloomy for sort of like general purpose SaaS businesses, I would say. I think there's a lot of, the build option has gotten a lot cheaper and a lot easier, and a lot more accessible. So that alters people's, choice in the build versus buy question. I don't think that it's all gloom, I guess. I think that especially from our perspective, like we think that there's a lot of things that you don't know to do when you're sort of building a prototype if you're not sort of like in that um sort of like problem space, I guess, like if you're not kind of immersed in it. Including
totally.
things, around sort of like scalability, observability, et cetera. And that's a temporary moat where agents can eventually sort of figure out how to generate all that stuff for you. But I don't think that we're like quite there yet. Um,
Yeah, the
so
thing I always think about there is the mind share tax, right? When you kind of build something yourself, even if you can prototype quickly, and you can prototype and demo stuff really fast right now,
right, yep,
but to actually have it satisfy all the edge cases and all the
yep,
little nuanced, detailed requirements that you didn't think of in the first go, and it's kind of this always on of just a little bit of your mind share is going
yeah,
towards that thing when mind share is often the limiting factor in companies, and the more you can direct it towards solving problems for your customers, I think the better off you are. But yeah, the build buy equation definitely changing,
yeah.
and we see it in the SaaS markets, public markets, SaaSpocalypse. It's a real thing.
Yeah, again, to your point around, I think there's like kind of a fractal kind of like amount of detail or like care or yeah, whatever that you have to do. And so you sort of naturally slow down as the thing becomes more real and more like the prototype's very, very quick. You can fire that off. And then I think if you're like truly vibe coding, I think that you sort of like tend to accrete kind of tech debt, essentially, like agentic tech debt. And then eventually you get to a point where the agent can't figure out how to fix something, and also you don't know anything about how you built the thing. So, and again, I think like agents are getting better in terms of their capabilities, and so maybe that point gets high enough to where you could actually build a pretty I don't know, scalable product before you hit that point. But I'm not as doom and gloomy as some people are. I also think that things tend, like more broadly, things tend to go in sort of like hype cycles.
Sure,
So
sure.
I feel like we're deep in the middle of one, and maybe the hype is justified. And I mean, we're definitely investing a lot in this right now. So,
Yeah.
and in general, I'm like fairly optimistic. I think just people will become more efficient and they'll build more and cooler stuff. That's my
Great. Well,
opinion.
that's a very positive note to end on.
Yeah,
This has been a really fun conversation. I guess one closing question for you. Any cool techniques, hacks, workflow setups, things that you've done, you've gotten a lot of leverage out of with your own usage of AI, where you're like, hey, here's a cool little tip or trick for one of our listeners that might be
tip or
beneficial to them.
trick. Good question. There was a funny thing the other day. So with this Devin thing that we're doing to sort of close the loop, you can sort of chat with the agent after it tries to do whatever task you've asked it to do. And so I asked it to sort of like build a workflow or whatever and test it locally. And it ran into a bunch of problems. And I sort of like Socratic methoded it to like fix it. Like I didn't actually change anything about the configuration of the environment. I just asked it questions about what it needed. It suddenly started realizing that it actually could do the thing that it could do, like a workaround for something, or it actually did have the key that it thought it didn't have, or something like that. And then I literally changed nothing about the configuration and it worked. And so I think like sometimes agents can just take a little bit of like convincing that they actually do know how to do something, that sometimes they're a little eager to sort of give up on tasks.
Hmm.
So that maybe that is the tip, is like
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
assume that what the agent is telling you that it can't do, it actually can't do it. Maybe be actually be able to do it. So
That's wild. Sometimes there are these moments in human agent interactions where it really feels like you're talking to a human because that's a very human thing too, right? Like if you have a junior
right.
engineer, they get stuck, you just,
Yep.
hey, what if, you just Socratic method them
Right.
through it and they get through it. And it's kind of wild that that's the
Yeah.
experience you can have with one of these
Yeah. And
systems
then we
as
just like
well.
save the playbook and say like, all right, in the future, just do this.
Yeah.
Learn from
Yeah.
your past, mistakes, or, yeah.
Very
So
cool. Very
yeah.
cool. Well, Mark, thanks so much for spending time with us and
Yeah.
sharing some of the cool
Absolutely.
projects that you're working on. Yeah, really, really fun conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much.